I'm Clint, and welcome to Swatches Livestream number 22. We will be going over last week's entries for the Victorian Environment City, and we'll be doing a picking of the top 3, as well as picking a winner for this week. The winner will, of course, win $25 from QBrush. They are sponsoring this particular live stream, so look forward to that. We'll be kicking off a new weekly art challenge for a creature design. It will be random, so I don't know exactly what that'll be. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes. Otherwise, if you're watching this in recording, then take a look for the timestamp down below. It can jump you right to the section that you want to watch. And if you're watching this live, then we'll leave a couple of minutes for people to join in and get seated before we get started. So I'm going to just check that all my stream settings look good and everybody is having a chance to join in. Okay, looks good. All right, I will pull this out of the way for a minute. Russell, welcome. You're the first one in chat. Good to see you. Sergio, welcome. How's it going, guys? I totally forgot to fix my water. I normally have my little bottle of water right there, but all right, well, I'll just do without this time. How's it going, guys? Christine, James, good to see you. Jay Welch, happy Monday, indeed. George says, at Swatches, Clint, thanks for your knowledge, sharing it with you again. Hey, you're welcome. George, thanks for joining. And if you're new to the chat or you just don't know because you haven't used chat, then put at Swatches in the comment and it will flag it in orange for me. It's much easier for me to notice those while it's scrolling than just trying to read everything while it's going. Okay, hello, 4 a.m. Nikita, wow. Well, thanks for staying up or getting up early. I don't know which one you're doing. Sebastian Schaefer, good to see you. Matthew Oates, hi, how's it going? We didn't have nearly as many entries this time. We have 24 entries for this week's. But I really liked seeing some of the ideas. And for everybody that did enter, good to see you're staying with it and you're keeping your skills sharp. 2 a.m. Yeah, I think occasionally we'll have to do an early afternoon stream on Mondays just for all of you guys that are joining from the other side of the planet. Maybe 4 or 5 hours earlier would be good. Catch you guys off of work. So it'd be like 2 p.m. here. No, it'd be like 1 p.m. here. I could do that. I could probably do a 1 a.m. stream sometime just to change it up. That'd be fun. Okay, well, let's start off with the new challenge for this week. You guys said that you kind of like that, so you can sketch on it during the stream. And then we will take a look at the entries for this week. So I made up a list of characteristics for a creature. A lot of requests for a creature challenge. So here we go. I came up with just a random list. Well, not random. I did think about it, but I just whatever came to my mind I put on the list. Yeah. Okay, these aren't in a particularly good order. I think we're going to start with class. And we will pick as many elements as we want. I don't think you'll need all of these, but we'll see what we get. There should be 20 in that class, so I'll just be rolling my D20. And we get number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is a aquatic creature. So I'll put that in bold. And then, let's see, aquatic. Well, I'm then not going to do these. It's not going to have fur, and it's an aquatic creature. So let's see about... Now, membrane here would be something like a jellyfish, right? It would be that sort of thing. It's not really skin. It's not scales. It's some sort of membrane. I'm sure there's a better term for it, but let's see. 1, 2, 3. It actually has an exoskeleton. Okay, that would be the plating that you would see on usually insects would have like an exoskeleton. So I'll put that one in bold. And maybe we'll also tab those. You can see that. There we go. And obviously it's going to be underwater. It is aquatic, so we won't need to choose this. And it doesn't have feet, so that wouldn't apply. How many appendages? Maybe it has appendages, though. Let's check that out. Number one, it has 2 appendages. Maybe they're big fins. Maybe there's some sort of arm things. Maybe they're tentacles. Whatever it is, you got 2 of those. So I'll tab that one. And then just some different characteristics. So let's take a look at characteristics list. I also put in halves down here. Maybe the creature could be half human or half plant, but I'm going to skip that for right now. Okay. Horns or antlers? Okay, I'll say that. It could be some sort of ramming horn, some sort of spike or thing coming off of its head. That could work. No feet, so no crabs. No, you could add those. Now, you can add extra things to it, but it needs to have at least these elements. So if you want to have a crab-like creature, give it some sort of little horn, almost like a beetle, and it lives under the water. Maybe it skirts along the bottom of the ocean floor and it stabs up at stuff. You can give it legs. Let's see. It needs to have at least 2 appendages. Maybe you want to give it more. I'll be open to that. We'll leave this fairly open, but do try to hit these elements. Definitely make it underwater. But there we go. We have at least a 2 appendaged aquatic creature with an exoskeleton, that sort of plating that some animals have. And it has some sort of horn or antlers to it. Swatches, will you be posting this to the Facebook page? Yeah, I'll put the outline of this on the Facebook page and put in the new link for the Dropbox. So if you're new to the channel, this is the new weekly challenge. And you have before next Monday to create your image and submit it. Go to the Facebook page, join there, and then I will post a link to the Dropbox folder. Upload your image to the Dropbox folder, and that's where I get access to everything. Okay, so I will toss that out of the way, and we will take a look at the entries for last week. Pull this back up. There we go. All right, so we had, like I said, 24, and we're just going to go alphabetically and do a roll call. I won't be commentating on every single image. Might toss out a comment here or there, but I just want to go through each one so you can see everything submitted. Aaron Howard starts us off this week, as he probably will most week, because his name starts with AA. We've got a city back here. We've got a lot of atmosphere going on. And it looks like it's just not real finished. I'm okay with the way it's going. He's got a big waterfall cutting through the city. That's kind of cool. I'd like to see a lot more use of that, with bridges really crisscrossing and tying the 2 halves of the city together over this massive waterfall that cuts down through the middle. Kind of like Venice, but on a mountainside. That's a cool idea. Next up, we have Daryl Gilham giving us a pretty cool take on the idea with a city on a train. I like that. Next up, David Slardy, another city. Victorian. Oh, yes, sorry, I forgot to mention. The outline for this particular challenge was to create a Victorian metropolis. And it could really be any kind of genre, as far as like mystery or adventure or lighthearted or anything as far as that goes. But Victorian time period of architecture with the city. All right, next up, Eric Bushy. Got a good big tower there with a mysterious sort of almost gothic feeling to it. Francel Garot, always good to see you submitting some solid pieces. Garrett Mooney, focusing on more of a single big tower rather than an entire scene. I don't know who this fella is in the foreground, but almost reminds me a bit of that, what was the game, Thief? Yeah, if you haven't looked at the concept art, there's some really neat concept art for Thief, where it's the, you know, they have the guy in the foreground. He's like hiding in the shadows, and there's aware of a place that he has to break into, you know, and it has some Victorian sort of architecture in that as well. Next up, Igor Bondar. Good to see you again. Igor's been putting in some really solid pieces pretty much every week, and it's always good to see your submissions. Solid piece, very clean. Joseph Stiller, I'm not sure which one. This is nice. I like the lead-in. The lead-in with the horses and the carriage really gives you a feeling of this being in action, gives you kind of anticipation of reaching up to the city. Nice approach. Julia Welch says, I was super busy this week, so only got to the sketching phase. Then I can't read that underneath the title. Week, no matter how complete it is. So, oh yeah, you never seem to quite complete an image. I do get that comment, and I think that's true. 1 week is probably pushing it. So I like the suggestion we had a while back, and I will be doing that, which is doing a 2 week. So you can submit things for 1 week, and then I will look at some of the sketches and do some comments on the sketches, and then you'll have another week to finish it. So it would basically be a 2 week, 2-part submission process instead of just a 1 week turnaround. If you like that or dislike that, toss some comments down here in the chat, and it's good to get some feedback live. All right, Lazaro Rhesus, give us another one. Nice character in the foreground. And Charlie Pencil Piece, thanks for giving another media. Of course, we do a lot of digital here on the channel, but it is certainly not the only thing we do. And I want to be open to receiving any kind of media. So Pencil, great to see it. I like their buildings. You did quite a bit of detail on there, and especially the blimp ship. I have a fondness for kind of blimp sort of, you know, fantasy vehicles. Okay, Matt Oates doing a solid piece here. Really getting that Victorian aesthetic. Plenty of people here in the foreground giving us a way to connect to the characters in this scene. This is kind of like a riff on the London that could be. I like that idea. Michael Rivera. Another good example of a lead-in, using the plane, kind of the same way as the one with the coach with the horses, giving us a lead-in to this city. So, yeah. The color is a good pop. This one just feels like it's probably a little unfinished, and I would like to see this one finished up more. This is a cool piece. Something you might think about is moving these, instead of going sideways, to move them a little more lengthwise, or some of them, so that they point into the city, rather than trying to block your vision from it. Yeah. Okay, next up, Mesquite Pecker. This is sort of a cool mixed media, because it looks like it was maybe inked by hand, but probably colored on the computer. But it's got a lot of atmosphere to it, and it's pretty simple, but I do like it. It's got a lot of mood to it. Almost like a indie comic book vibe going on with it. Nice. We have Morello Giustiniano. Simple, all right? Not a lot going on here, but like I said sometimes, the bones of the image is really nice, right? The gist of it, the perspective works. I would say the narrative of the scene works, with probably the dad and the kid looking at the blimp, and this guy over here is going, yeah, that's kind of cool. And it just works. It's not as detailed or refined. It's not a finished idea, but it is one that would work if you kept working with it, because it has solid bones to it. No, Castillo. This one, let's see if I can pull that up any bigger. I'm trying to grab this computer. Sorry, my mouse died just a little before I started, so normally I would do like precision clicking with my mouse. Okay. Miska says ink and Copics, then Photoshop. Oh, on that piece, yeah, okay, that's cool. I wouldn't mind if it was 2 weeks to the due date, but there were new competition given every week. But there was a new competition given, so they would be staggered as opposed to new one given every 2 weeks, then one finishes. I don't know, because that would mean you'd have 2 going on at the same time, and if it still means that you only have a week per image. That doesn't change anything. Because if you have 2 weeks to finish 2 images, that's still just 1 week per image. Yeah. Okay, this one, I'm not sure what the story is, but there's like a werewolf riding along on the back of a stagecoach into the city. So it piques my interest. He's like hitchhiking and eating the passengers along the way. I'm not sure, but it is, it's kind of cool. The colors need a little work. It looks like it was kind of thrown together, just basic colors, splash. And that's probably what happened, probably just trying to establish some basic tones very quickly. But keep going with it. And it's one that I think would actually work better if you were pulled in closer to it. If you were more like the other one where the stagecoach was a lot closer to the viewer, it kind of puts us down in the scene rather than just being this distant observer, and all of a sudden we get to see a lot more of the werewolf, and we get to see where he's going, as if we were there. Okay, Renato Prezioso, give us a cathedral scene, a dark scene. Some things really going well here, and that is the green. The green can be a very useful image to show life. Like if you're doing a nature scene, right? You want the green leaves, and that is a symbol of life. But when you use green in other ways, a lot of times in a man-made situation, like a city, all of a sudden it takes it on a very eel tone. And that works well for this, because it's like, I guess, a plague is probably going on. That's my guess. Pile of bodies, looks like it's been rotting, or maybe they were burned. A couple of bodies on sheets over here. So that's my take on it. But the perspective is excellent here on the cathedral and the detail on that. So props on that. Next up, Ricardo Albion, Final 14 Swatches Challenge. This is pretty cool. I forget which city. Is it Prague that has some really notable bridges like that? So maybe you took a... Yes, kitty. You know what happens, right? If you jump up here in the stream, you have to say hi to everybody. Yeah, this is Fuzzy. This is the studio cat. You want to sit in my lap? Come here. Come sit down. There you go. Alright, so this is cool. It has a lot of mood to it. Not overly detailed, right? Went for a good time usage. And that's something I said last week or the week before, I forget. That is, how you light a scene directly determines how long that scene takes to paint. So if you do a very minimal lighting like this, it's hazy, it's nighttime, and basically the only lights you get are the lights that you see in windows and lamps, then all of a sudden you can render a scene in silhouette very quickly. Next up, Ricardo Pyrovan, if I'm hopefully saying that correctly. Good use of perspective here. I like the angle. This really draws you into the scene. It really draws you into understanding what she's looking at and kind of being in awe of it with her. Ricardo says, end up with a sketch instead of rushing the paint in some hours. I'll render it accurately to maybe have something that beat my latest decent paint. All right, cool. This works so far for me. I think this is cool. I'm guessing this is like rock or trees. In line work, it looks a little odd. I'm not entirely sure what I'm making out there, but I'm assuming that's some sort of natural formation over there. I'd like to see you continue this with the right lighting, some good colors, big cast shadow from one side of the building on the other building. Then you could have a cool scene going on with this. You might even make the blimp a little bit bigger. Those things are generally really massive. I guess that looks pretty big. I don't know. I'd question it a little bit. Next up. Yeah, that's actually a good question from Russell. How did you do the line work? Because nice curves in Photoshop with lines, not the easiest thing unless you're doing vector. And yeah. Okay, and next we have Sergio Ramirez. I love the limited palette on this. I think that's one of my favorite things. It's a really good example of a limited palette. The gamut is very small. That is, all available colors are fairly limited. We do have some issues with the perspective going on because each one of these is kind of like at a different angle, but all the perspective isn't accurate for all of them. So you need to double check that, make sure you have that right. And also give me some more explanation about why there's water coming out of all of these. It's a cool idea, but you sell me on it. Sell me on it, all right? Where's all this water coming from? Why is it coming out of this building? Was it supposed to be that way, or is like a river diverted and now it's coming out? Or you don't need to explain it and you just need to go very surrealistic with it and, take it that way, right? And do something really odd with it. So, take it even further, run with it. All right, next up, Timmy Aura Paper. This one is a different take. I'm not sure exactly. Like an underground city is my impression of it. I'm not sure if I'm exactly right on that. But it's like the top of a tower underground, but yet there's another level to the city, like an upper, crisscrossing area, almost like in a big stadium. You look up and there's always like little walkways up at the top of the ceiling so that they can get to lights and stuff. I'm guessing that's what's going on here. I think it's a really good idea. There's probably a better way to execute it. Like, I need to see more of the city, right? If these were thinner and I got to see more of the city, then I can piece that together. And maybe there's like chains or something coming down and holding up parts of these walkways. Or if I don't remember if the stalactites or stalagmites that come off the ceiling, and maybe those come down and they're anchored to the things hanging from the ceiling. So yeah, go with that direction. That could really work. Please move the face cam. Well, where would I move it to? Well, I can move this over. Maybe that would be helpful. Yeah. Okay, and next up, we have Thomas Mateus giving us a very dark scene. This is definitely more on the horror. We got some sort of big ogre dudes, and they are setting a bonfire with a giant flame skull. Maybe they're feeding some sort of fire demon. Just tossing people in there. Yeah, they got whole piles of them. The crow seems amused. So, I like this. This is kind of cool. All these spikes coming up here. I'm a little unclear. It's just like the whole thing is a little unclear. And I almost feel like it's dividing between you put a character right up here for me, but then you give me all this. So it's like the attention is sort of torn between the two. So yeah, I think it still needs some work, but it's cool. You took on a lot with this image. Thanks for sending it in. The plan is making the behind for the, but I couldn't make it. The plan is making the behind for the. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. Sorry, Tommy. To me, that I don't think you typed that correctly. Ulrich Lorenz, very moody, sort of cathedral style building. I like it. It's maybe a little too loose. You're probably still working on it, but it has a lot of merit to it. You may think about doing like some wet pavement down here, giving a little reflection of that. This sort of thing is really cool. It works for this, like super low cloud slash fog obscuring the top of it. I'd probably do that to some of these as well. And that way you keep the focus right down on the lower section. And maybe some light coming in through some windows, some nice long Gothic sort of shapes for the windows. The plan is making the behind for the city Victorian scene, but I couldn't make it. Sorry, I'm bed sleeping. That's fine. Okay, next up we have Ewan Gil. You just give me the best names. Gaio? I'm sorry, I apologize for my butcher of that. Ewan, this automatically made me think of like a book cover. You've got this nice big space right up here, and a fairly generic character seen from the back with a cool scene. Yeah, that seems like right at home in what a book cover would look for. I would suggest adjusting these a little bit so that they're in an angle, right? So have them going like this. Well, it'd be that for you guys because you look in this direction. And so it leads you into the image. You see this one and its perspective draws you in. You see this side, its perspective draws you in. And then it takes you to the background, right? To what he's looking at back there. Otherwise, when you have them straight flat like that, it makes you want to visually stop at that plane and not observe anything past that. It's sort of, you want to invite the viewer into the image. So, okay, very cool. That is all the entries for this week. Now we will take a look at the top 3, and we will have some discussions and paintovers of various other ones just based on some things, topics, talking points that it brings up. So the select for this week, there was 5 that I wanted to put in, but 5 I felt was too many, so I had to cut 2 of them, and it was close. What we ended up is with these. And now let me talk you through why I chose these. Daryl Gilham. This one is just very original. All right, Victorian Megalopolis. I'll go ahead and read this here. I was trying to think of something different and unique. I think it fits the bill. Although the Ferris Wheel Village, see, he has some other ideas. We have Ferris Wheel City, Tree City, like Tethered Floating City, Pop-Up City, Cuba City, MC Escher City, Train City, Upside Down City, like Face Hair City, Elephant City, Underwater City, and was it Floating, I think? Which would be the game. I forget which game is that. BioShock Infinite, Floating City. Okay, so although the Ferris Wheel Village was unique, it didn't have the required size. I felt the MC Escher City would be neat, but my art style wasn't the right fit. I dismissed the Cuba City as not applicable to the challenge, and most of the others being unoriginal. Wasn't intending to use photo bashing. The technique is new to me, but with a limited amount of time, I figured it might be faster. First time using Perspective Guide in Procreate, though. Yeah, I use Procreate also on my iPad. It is my go-to application when I'm drawing on my iPad, but I've not used the Perspective Guide, so I'm going to have to check that out because the perspective looks good on here. So yeah, it's a train city. I can just pile it all on there. The lighting looks good. The perspective is pretty consistent. You get a little off on some of this. I get it. It's an illustration. My main suggestion here would be give me a turn. Back there in the distance, give me a turn to that train so that I can see the rest of it back there. And it can almost be in silhouette. You wouldn't only have to put much detail. Just give me some shapes and little tower tops and that sort of thing. And a cast shadow going across there. Then let me know it's not just one block of buildings, but this is like an entire, multi-mile long set of buildings on the train. So props for the idea. It's an interesting take on it that I would not have anticipated being sent in. Next up, Francel. Another really solid piece from Francel. I'll see if it will open it. Yeah. For whatever reason, since being updated, OS wants to open things in not the right program. It wants to open them with Grab, which is a stupid program that nobody uses. So anyway, Francel, just a very solid piece, like I said. Good perspective. Everything works together. Nothing really fits, doesn't fit here. The scene works well as far as setting me in mood. And it has a nice combination of being close enough that I feel like I could be standing in the city, like some doorway, but also being far away enough that I get a feeling of the sprawl of the city. That's one of the few things that I didn't get here. I get the feeling like this is pretty big, but I don't get the sprawling metropolis of it. It would be a little bit more if we saw more of the train. This is good. This is also a good example of what it can look like to block in a city without having to do a lot of line work and a lot of details. You can just look at some of these big shapes. He's just blocking in some shapes and then adding a bit of simple color and shadow and shapes to them. So you start with a bigger shape and you subdivide it with some smaller shapes and some smaller shapes and smaller shapes. And then you just pick your shape language, and he's done that here. He's picked an angle of the roof that he likes, and he keeps reusing that angle. He picks the sort of spire that he likes, keeps using that same spire. So that's really nice. If you just press the spacebar, I want it to show bigger. Maybe. Nope, that's rename. Oh, it does. Okay, well, counting me for being oblivious to that. I didn't realize that. I don't use that view very much, so hey, thanks for that comment. Yes, that's much better. Okay, so yeah, there we go. And you probably used a reference for this. Again, you can see a limited color palette, and it's not real clean, but I'm not really guessing as far as what I'm looking at. I have a pretty good idea of everything that I'm looking at. Now let's go ahead and pull up this one a little bigger. If I just click that. Oh, okay, awesome, cool. I like it. Pull this back up here. Yeah, so there you go. He did use photo bashing, if you're unaware of what that is. That he used different photos and kind of matched them to the perspective that he likes. Then he put another photo in, and then he sort of paints the edges and the lightings and the shadows so that they all look consistent for the artwork. So it's part painted, part photos, and all combined together for that. And it's a good example of photo bashing because it reads very consistent. So nice on that. Next up, Igor Bondar. This is a very clean piece. It's well handled. And there we go. Sorry, something made noise up here. I cannot zoom in more than that. Okay. But like I said, very clean piece. Good color and value schemes on it. It's very sharp. And good... I'd say focal points. It does a good job of drawing you right to this tower, and a good use of sky. Remember, that's something I said a week or two ago is a lot of people don't make use of their skies to add any kind of movement or impact with it. And this is a good use. I think this might be a little much. These are just kind of odd little shapes right here. But I like the overall swoop to this, and it's good use of that. The color scheme is nice that it goes from this cool at the top to basically nice and warm at the bottom. And the lights, again, most of the detail that you're seeing are in the silhouettes and in the lights, because it would be very difficult and time consuming in order to render this scene in the daytime, or would be the daytime scene version of this, because you would have so many shadows and so many colors. That said, I would suggest bringing the value up on the front just a little bit, or letting the tops, that is the roofs, everything facing upwards, let that be a bit more like this. When that's catching that nice moonlight, the cool light here, then let that catch some cool light on this part that's facing upwards. And it will break up just the monotonous dark down there. You don't want to break it up too much with the value, but you could break it up with half step of value, half as much value as it could go, and then do it with the color as well. So you're shifting cooler and lighter, and that shouldn't break it up too much. You also might break up the windows by having some like drapes. Have some drapes on the inside. And the drapes could be like, some of them are like almost all closed. Some of them are almost all open. They also had shutters a lot. It's just that these are very repeating shapes. They look kind of copy and pasted. They're all like exactly perfect. And so we want to change it up. Maybe it has a shutter half open or half closed. Add some more little drapes on the inside. Yeah, just a couple of suggestions on that. But overall, very crisp piece that I'm happy to see you guys. Igor sent that in. So for this week, my top pick is going to be Igor. Igor, I got to give it to you. It's just a very professional piece, and it's super clean for the amount of time that you had, and it works well pretty much on every front. It does. Is it finished? Is it perfect? No, but it is very self-supporting. Like, it does what it needs to do. It hits all the marks it needs to hit. It got a sprawling city, and I get the time period that it's supposed to be in. It's well handled. It's got a nice color scheme to it, and it invites you just sort of into the mood. It's something you could see on a book cover or just on a poster, just because it's kind of cool. I think that you could also work with this a little bit. That almost seems a little more spaceshipy than blimp. And maybe that's what you're going for, but I think you're probably going for more blimp. So check out that a little bit. So Igor, he will be winning the $25 from QBrush. Now, if you're not familiar with QBrush, then go out to qbrush.co. And they are a resource that sells all kinds of resources for us artists and 3D modeler artists. So check out educational art videos. There is photo packs like stock photos. There is brush sets, 3D models if you do 3D modeling, and all kinds of great stuff out there. Mark Burnett is the one that starts that. That is his site. And he also has some really excellent videos and education out there. I sell some of my content and videos out there as well. So if you win, you're welcome to use that on any of the stuff out there on that site. So we appreciate them sponsoring us. And that right now, this is the last one they're sponsoring for this month. So we will have to chat with them about next month. Nothing is set on that. So next week, maybe not, another QBrush. So you'll just have to stay tuned for that. All right, so let's talk about some of these other images. Let me go back to this. Back here. Oh yeah, I already had it on this tab. That's right. So we want to discuss some things. Eric Bushy, let's open yours up here. And of course, you guys are feel free to toss me comments or questions, especially during this Paintover discussion time. And I'm going to make a new layer. So this one had a lot of good things going for it, but I think it missed on a couple of little elements, and that's what I wanted to talk about. So he's put in a lot of good effort, made a solid bit here, but it just missed out. And why did it? That's what we're heading on. Okay, let's go a little smaller. Yep, good. 9, okay. Okay, a couple of things. I like the overall feel. The focal point, that's good. I know exactly what I'm looking for. One of the issues with the focal point, though, is that it doesn't fit with this architecture. If this was a cathedral, like a really odd-shaped cathedral that has You know, the big spires here. It's like flat across there. It has a spire there. Then it has the, I don't know, like a clock face or something on that side. And then all of a sudden, you can start kind of connecting to it as far as what it is. You could also look at Dracula's castle from the Castlevania games. And that gives you some really cool shapes because it's a very vertical Gothic sort of structure. Another thing would be the color scheme. You've got this nice, cool, and then all of a sudden this is warm. And that doesn't really fit. Like, there would be so much atmosphere from here to there that if anything is cool in this scene, it would probably be that. The only way that it could really be that warm is if it was like straight orange. And that would seem really weird because you've taken a very realistic approach to the colors. And so if I'm going to buy the premise that you've set up, then I have to buy the fact that that would have to be orange for it to look that warm at that distance under this lighting. So I would suggest go ahead and shifting that to the color that you already have established. And maybe you just hit slightly warmer, right? Not a lot. Not as much as you had. Then let's pull in here. This is sort of an odd way to do it. I'm not sure what you're going for. I guess you were trying to go for some sort of focal point on the structure itself, so you did this design. But it just looks Photoshop filtery. Just a glow around a shape. And again, this is losing detail as we go back, right? And as we're going back here, this hardly has any detail on it. We've got some detail here because there's a little more light, I guess, down here than on the front. But back here, it's going to be so far away, unless it's like a neon sign, we're not going to be able to pick up many details because that's like 5 or 10 miles away. So if you want to have a design going on, that's fine, and that's probably a good idea. But we need to find a better way to do it. Like if this was down here, and we changed this so that all of a sudden this is the shape of the hole in the tower, right? And it's got this shape in it. So now we're looking through the tower and it has this odd sort of architecture to it. And now it has a bit more of a different feeling, right? Now we can kind of buy that shape, that we could see it at that distance because it's literally like a lack of building being there. We're seeing the glow of the sky from behind it. So that would be one way to do that sort of thing. I think that would be helpful. Just find a really cool contour silhouette for it. Comment, Ricardo says, I heard a lot of discussion about balanced compositions in terms of visual weight versus the rule of thirds. I'm really looking for some advice on the argument if this fits the Paintover. Balanced compositions in terms of visual weight versus the rule of thirds. A rule of thirds is always good. But yeah, visual weight has several things. So visual weight can be balanced by color or value. I'm not spelling right. Interest. Is it of interest to the character in the scene? If they're looking at it, it's also interest to you as the viewer. It's also faces are of interest to the viewer, so they draw extra visual weight. All these things have a intangible weight, right? As well as detail. So something that is more detailed will seem to have more visual weight than something that has less detail, like a simple silhouette. And so this actually works out pretty good. In this case, this has more contrast, and it's a big, massive black. Now, we kind of need more visual information and a cooler silhouette on this to balance out how detailed the silhouette is on these, because this is a pretty interesting set of shapes. But that one's just kind of a block with a couple of things on it. So we want to make this one at least as interesting. And let's reuse some of those same spires, right? So let's come up here, and you can have the little platforms going off of it, and maybe you have like some sort of staircases or whatever, and having this, and you can have little things off of there, and you can just come up with some really cool shapes. This is getting very Dracula's castle sort of thing going on here, almost a little sci-fi, but that's cool. Maybe it has that sort of thing going on. Then, changing this up so that it has a narrower base, right? We want to make it get bigger or smaller or something. So all of a sudden it has a little bit more visual weight because its silhouette has more detail and interest to it. So yeah, it kind of, we can go over composition. I'll be talking about composition in a later video more. But yeah, there's so many cool things about composition. Like you can have a little orange ball would offset a larger gray ball. So this one's bigger, so it has more visual weight. But that one has a lot more color, so it balances it out. And if they were sitting on a scale, then they would be about even. This one might even have to be a little bigger for the same visual weight to it. But yeah, there's some cool stuff with that. Other things. Yeah, it wouldn't take a lot of work, but to come in here and start just pulling out a little detail. Yeah, that's the right letter. So like grabbing that slightly lighter tone there. And coming in and just hitting up some of these spots. And this is where you can do some photo bashing just to put basic faint shapes in there. Then you can start picking those shapes out, whichever ones that you like. And this is going to be a good place to do like windows, right? So you have reflections in the windows. And you have just a basic details up here with some sort of little shapes. Computer isn't quite keeping up with me here. It's hard to draw when I can't see the thing moving. So yeah, I mean, you can establish some quick shapes like that and just give an idea of what's going on there. The idea that you have this hanging down there, which makes me almost think of like wires, and that can be cool. That maybe there's some sort of slightly more advanced technology here. Computer's having a slow time. I think it's trying to update something in the background. So yeah, you could toss that sort of thing in here. And these could be a really neat way to lead the eye. So you got this coming down here to here to here. And then what you do here, you have like another one leading in on this side, but it's probably going to be lighter because it's going to be catching light, and you have some sort of pole down here. And then you just have really faint ones down there a little lines, and that sort of drives you in. Okay, looking at Christiana says, how would you go about improving your art even though you don't struggle with the basics? Faces, for example. How would you go about improving your art even though you don't struggle with the basics? Once you get the basics done, that's a really good time to start finding a teacher or a mentor or some better professional to give you some feedback, because it can start getting a lot more difficult to figure out where you should go. And so start trying to find some places where you could get that. And then it's just putting in the hours, right? It's do some studies, do some quick studies, and then do some bigger pieces and find a piece that you think is really good, somewhere that you'd want to, some level that you'd want to reach, and do a piece and keep working on it until it pretty much matches that level. And it'll force you to try to keep improving to match that. Try out some different styles too. That can be a good way to make you start thinking in different directions. Yeah. Faces. One thing I heard was when drawing faces, like if you're doing portraits, that to start with, you're going to get 1 out of 10 right. You're only going to capture a likeness 1 out of 10 for the first 100 that you draw. And then pretty much every 100 that you draw after that, you're going to get another 10% right. So that after you do 900 or 1,000 portraits, you'll be hitting a likeness about 9 out of 10 times. So if you want to get better at drawing faces, it's sort of, that's the sort of point you reach. Yeah. Urical says, any advice for someone who's become over-reliant on reference to the point you can't start without a reference? Yeah, start without a reference. That's, I guess you could start by doing some studies. I've mentioned this before, but it's probably been a long time, and maybe most people haven't heard it. And this is something I've done in the past. I wanted to be able to draw like Vikings better from memory, and like a Roman centurion, a couple of other guys. So what you can do is, if you're really stuck for doing reference, you do what I do. Let's take Vikings, for example. Then you go get a book or website, find some photos of historical Viking clothing, and then you define 3 things that is characteristic to them. Go ahead and copy a couple, right? Copy a couple from your authentic sources. And the same thing can be applied to architecture or trees or whatever topic it is you're drawing. In this case, Vikings. So I copied a couple of little sketches from Warriors book, lots of photos. And like, what 3 things make it look like Viking? Well, one of it is like the length of the cut of the clothes. And another one would be the sort of leather, the way that they attach the leather bits of the armor. And maybe it's the sort of helmet that they have. All right, so you write those out. And then what you do is the next day you come back to it and you don't look at the reference and you draw a Viking again. And you're trying to remember those 3 things. And if you keep those 3 iconic things about what makes a Viking look like a Viking, then you can sketch Vikings without a reference. And you're going to generally hit the point. And it's going to be enough of the notion that you can pull it off and it look like a Viking, but yet it's going to have enough blank points in it that you're going to be forced to be creative to fill in those blank spots. So maybe you're drawing trees and you're like, okay, I want to learn how to draw a conifer tree. I want to learn how to draw a palm tree. And you learn different kinds of trees, and you learn different ways that the branches can work, or the different kinds of leaves. And so you learn 3 different aspects to a particular tree. and you draw it, and then you come back the next day and you draw it again without reference. And maybe you come back a week later and you have to draw it again. And what this is going to do is it's going to ingrain some of those major elements into your long-term memory so that you can draw on those later without having to have reference. Maybe that's not the direction you were thinking, but hopefully that helps. Russell says, I know you said you don't like it, but any tips on starting the concept process with emphasis with building and perspective? I know you just say you don't like it, but any tips on starting the concept process with emphasis with buildings and perspective, especially those beginning steps? Thank you so much. Any tips on starting the concept process? Okay, one of the things that you can do if you're starting to do buildings and perspective is definitely start thinking about the basic forms going on. Architecture. A couple of ways that you can take it. One is don't draw them in perspective. If you are just trying to figure out the basic look of something, like what is the architecture flavor, then you need to get an idea of what the shapes are. So simplify it. Just draw it from like front facing or side facing. And then once you do that and you get a feeling of the sort of shapes, is it real vertical? Is it real horizontal? Does it use stone? Does it use wood? Whatever makes that architecture iconic to that architecture. Then you can start applying that in perspective and work with the basic form. All right, just do a cube. Then you've done your studies from a side view, right? And then you can just kind of map that onto the building. It can work a lot better. Otherwise, you're trying to figure out the architecture in perspective as you're defining the building itself. And that can be a little much to ask. So break it down into steps and do it one at a time that way. Also, feel free to work over another photo. So maybe you want to do a Victorian metropolis like we have here, and you're just trying to find a cool perspective of like you're in the city and the buildings around you. How can you do that? How can you get your head around it? Well, take a photo of like Times Square. Right now, Times Square, you can see the perspective, and you work out the perspective of the scene and the location of the buildings. But you're not going to be able to use that reference because it's modern glass and steel buildings. So essentially you can map your city and your buildings onto a scene that has the perspective of you like, but you're getting rid of all of the actual content. And then once you start putting your own buildings into the perspective and the arrangement from this other reference photo, then you can start making additions and subtractions and saying, it'd be really cool if we added a little elevated bridge across here. It would be cool if we had a subway entrance right here. And it becomes its own thing after a little while, but basing it on a photo and using that to define your perspective or your layout can be a good place to start as well. Okay, let's open another one. A couple of other comments here. Okay, Matt, you had a really solid image here, and I was very tempted to include it with the top this week, but there's some perspective issues going on here. So I first want to say that this is really solid, right? Like all the bottom of this is really solid. And I get what you're going for with that, but it's not pulled off quite right. So let's break it down. I'm going to fiddle around with the layers here for a second. Yeah, okay. So let's grab this. 23 is too much. Let's set that to 10. So we have very clear perspective going on. I'll run a perspective line there. Actually, that's probably too big. We'll just do 5. There we go. That all stays about the same all the way down. There we go. And it's about like this. Or maybe we could use that. Yeah. Okay. So the horizon line is right on the level where those meet. A little bit lower right there. The horizon line's right along here. So that's very consistent. Like, that's the eye level of the characters. That's the eye level here. That looks about right for the doors. These guys must be standing up on a step or something, or he's like really tall. But anyway, that's fine. I could buy that. So that all looks good. And this runs down to here. And this building pretty much uses the right perspective. Same thing for this side. However, it doesn't work for some of these other buildings. So if we were to get this and run it down, all of a sudden, it doesn't feel like maybe these all back here match with that, right? And so this, oh, kitty, thank you. That's nice. So this bridge, like the thickness of this bridge here and here is not the same. And this, as much as we're looking, how can I say it? Look how much that this building perspectivizes by the time it gets to there, right? So that is a really big, massive perspective change for this distance. Now, the distance on this bridge from here to here is several times greater than that, but we have far less of foreshortening going on. So if the thickness of the bridge was this much on here, it would need to be like massive on this other side. The other thing is, don't forget about the round shapes, right? So we have a pretty good amount of curve here because we're looking up at this a lot. We have a decent amount here, more here, more here, but then we have almost flat here. In which this is so far above us, this would be rounded almost like that and would be getting this fairly extreme view up at all of these things. All right. It would take a while to work out all the perspective about that, but we'd really be looking up at that stuff. So I'm going to say that probably needs work. I like this idea. Let's keep this. I don't know that the bridge really needs to be there, or if it does, you can do minimal. Like if the bridge was just coming more like this, and then let's have the tower more here, and then actually put the girder, like, let's put this down a little bit, like this. So actually have the girder as part of the city. So it's basically this thing is straddling that building, right? Now all of a sudden, it's drawing you right into the city. It's part of the city, and maybe it has another bridge right back here. So this thing like cuts right through the middle of the city. Right over here. And then we have that wonderful fogginess going across there. All right. Hopefully you all kind of follow what I'm trying to do here. So that's cool. Then we can have some more layers, right? It's fine. We can have these sorts of things. But another thought was the direction that you could take this is, I mean, what if this was just part of the same building? Mr. Computer, if you would please catch up to me, that would be really lovely. Oh, it's wanting to not do that. So let's say that this was part of that building. Personally, I think that's pretty cool. And then maybe this could be like I kind of like that shape. So maybe this was brass, so it would like stand out a little bit, and we don't lose that lovely detail there. And this could be, I'm thinking this would probably be going off that way. Now all of a sudden that's pretty cool, and we could have some change in angles with this, and we'll have a series of you know, maybe even that one could be taller too. That could be cool. We have another. It's my color changing brush. It keeps giving me colors I don't want instead of the ones I do want. So you have your little layers, right, of fog coming down on each one. So it gets a little lighter at the bottom, and it goes up, and it's light down here, and it goes up. It's light here, and it goes up. And then I feel like that is kind of stopping it. At some point, we need a simple area that doesn't have a lot of detail, that doesn't have something in it. We need a rest area for the eyes. So maybe it gets back to that point. Then we have, kind of like I did on that other image, you can have some low clouds at some point. And this fog just eventually becomes too much, and it just obscures almost all of this. And you can make out some of that tower back there. Okay, the other thing with this image is that the focal point. All right, the scene itself is really cool, but what is the focal point? And there's several things vying for the focal point. It's kind of like composition. You're seeing what visual weight. Everything has visual weight. So let's break down some of the visual weights of this image. Number one, we have this light. It is the biggest, widest, lightest thing in the image. All right, so it wants our attention. This is contender number two. Why? Because it has the most detail. It has the most visual information packed into it. And it has letters. That is a second thing. Anything that has letters, automatically we want to read them. You don't even have to think about it. You just look at it and you immediately interpret the letters. This one is contender number three. Basically the same sort of thing. Visual information and letters. Contender number four. If the computer will kindly move that. Thank you. Contender number four is this clock tower. Why? Because it's pretty much dead center and it's round. And eyes love target shapes. Circles and circles. And that's what we get with a clock phase. So there we go. That is contender number four. This all handles pretty well. Like, she is fairly close to the camera, but you keep her in shadow. And even though it's a face, it's in shadow. It's off to the side. It doesn't really try to grab our attention. Easily you could have a subject right here. Because why? Everything points there. All right, so that would be an excellent place to put a focal point, but he hasn't, so we're not going to make use of that. In fact, that would be a good place. Wow, I'm sorry, but this is going like 10 seconds of lag on the drawing. I'm curious why it's doing that. Is it still saying I have good... I'm dropping very few frames, but it's having a heck of a time with something. I don't know. Sometimes it does try to update stuff in the background, and I'm just... I don't know what it is, so I can't go stop it. Okay, so yeah, this needs to be decided. I love the idea of a lamp, but it's probably not what we need right there. And so we could probably drop that lamp. That's not a contender that we really need. If we want some lights up there, we could have some bigger lights or, bigger lights up here on the bridge. And that would serve as giving lights to this particular area. No, I have plenty of RAM. Normally it's good. It's just when OBS is running and I have multi-layers in Photoshop and I'm streaming back the video that I'm sending out, I think what it is the video card is probably being overtaxed. And I've got some other stuff open too. Anyway, so, okay, moving on. This, I want to say, is cool, but that's not a good place. Put it drop middle. So if this was moved, put it back here maybe. If we took this out of the way, that would be a good place to put the tower. No, it wouldn't, because that'd be right on top of that one. That's not a good place. Cancel that. Over here where that one is, could be a good place to put the tower, or make this a tower. That would be kind of cool too. Zeppelins up here, those are a nice little addition. Don't put too much focus on them, but that can be good. Give me some cool silhouettes. You have some nice silhouettes going on here with the edge work. So we want to do that and then get these same sort of lights, more muted version of them. You have a little bit there. I'm not sure why you made it like pinky, but I'd probably go with more of that tone that you already have established on that one. So something to think about here is make it like this city is on a mountain, right? So think about roads going up the side of this mountain. And so you've got rows of buildings going up this mountain, following the contour of it. Take a look at some cityscape over in like Edinburgh. I was over there, visited there years ago, and I took some photos, and I remember that. I remember looking up and seeing these rooftops as they go up in perspective up the side of this mountain. And it's kind of cool. You just get this really layered effect of that. So hopefully that helps out. Yeah, some ideas there. You need to figure out what your focal point wants to be. And I'll probably say scrap that. And you can have some colors. Don't put the immediate text. You might just put theater. I think the theater right here actually could be a really cool drawing point for the scene. Let's play up the reflections. And let's play up some of the light, how much light it's casting out on things. And so it's like, the people just went to and from the theater. So that's what the scene is about. And this all can be played down a little bit. All the background, everything else can be played down a little bit so that this becomes a focal point and it's off center a little bit. Okay, next up, there was one other, Ricardo. Just some simple things on this, but if you're going to be working in, come on, Photoshop. Maybe I'll go ahead and close this one and then it won't have a burden on the CPU. There we go. So on this one, this is a really nice establishing part to the image. But let's give some nuance to it. So I put a darken layer on. I'm going to set it down to like 43. No, a little bit more than that. Higher 50s. And I just want to mute out some of the lights in the back are going to still be having to go through a lot of atmosphere in order to reach us. So they can't be as sharp and vivid and saturated as the lights in the foreground. So right now they're really, really close about how dark they are. And that's not what we want. So we want to tone those down so those look like they're more in the distance. Next, we want to make a lighten layer. And then I'm going to grab... Prague is a beautiful city. Yeah. I'm going to grab another layer set to lighten. So, of course, you can only brighten things instead of darken them. I can go over this guy. And set those back just a little bit more. And then I think it's a good idea if you do it one more time so that you have multiple layers. So maybe those towers are a bit further back. Maybe this tower is a bit further back. So there's some variation on those, yeah. Then let's do this one. I'm going to grab this and cancel out that. Oh, did you put a TARDIS down here? Is that what you did? I just noticed the TARDIS. I'm sorry. That's awesome. I love it. I'm a fan. Oh, I totally butchered that. I wasn't even paying attention. Ugh. Alright, so I'm trying to get the shape of this and basically mask this out real fast. There's several ways to do this. I'm just doing a rough, messy way of doing it. So, okay, that goes back that way. Okay. And then this would have the reflection of that in there. So we want to grab that. Okay. Now, I want to make a new layer and set that to, you know, I'm going to set it to a linear dodge. And grab this brush. Hide that. Okay, so this is a really cool shape, right? Actually, I'm going to adjust that a little bit first. I'll just pull out some of these. So this is a cool shape, this bridge, but it's not being made use of very much, and we want to draw more attention to it. Really show how elegant it is, and help it to feel like it has more distance to the background than what we have right now. Because the darkness between the background and the foreground isn't that much, and we want to add just a little more magic to it. So, again, this is a fast way to do it, just for example. Okay, good enough. Swatches says, Adio, well, you mentioned about the ascend-descend terrain. Can you explain how the perspective drawing would work in that situation? Yeah, for every single new set of buildings, you have to run new perspective lines. And it would be tedious. You could probably eyeball it if you're just doing silhouettes. You're just doing like, you know, tops of buildings with like chimneys and spires and stuff. And so you wouldn't have to be doing that much perspective. You just need to make sure that they're getting smaller at the right ratio. Something else actually to consider on that image is on the foreground buildings, lessening how much foreshortening happens. That is a lot of foreshortening, and everything in the background is going to be super foreshortened. And if it was being that foreshortened, that clock tower in the background would be like 2,000 feet tall. Because that building that was 2 stories was like tiny by the end of the road. So if you had a tower that was, you know, several miles behind it and it reached that far in the sky, it would be just massive. Maybe that's what you're going for. But if it's not, then, yeah. So, you know, if we do this and cast a little fog or light across there, then it really helps to bring out the bridge shape. And we could say that maybe that the moon is up there somewhere. And oh, I meant to have that here. There. That is too bluish. So I can throw some quick water stuff down here. Yeah. Yeah, so a little fog like that all of a sudden brings that out a lot more. And yeah. It's a little bit there. We could also do some reflections, right, from the lamps. So I grab some sort of color like that. Then we can have some broken little lights. You'd have to figure out exactly where those would fall, but you could have some reflections. Maybe you have some of this blue, you know, violet tone sort of breaking through. You get to see a little bit of the shapes of the buildings there in the background, but that could be helpful too. Okay, so, yeah. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover. And so you guys are welcome to toss me some questions. We can answer questions for a bit more. Otherwise, that was all my talking points. Pretty sure. Yeah. Oh, that was just a photo of a foggy cemetery. Yeah. No, I don't need that program. Yeah. So that was kind of cool. Just the way that works. Also, notice something on this, that you have more color, so you have more of the greens and browns here in the foreground, and as it goes away, it becomes more monochromatic. So here, you might have a bit more color just on some of these closer things. Then as it goes back, it gets to a super blue sort of tone there. But, all right, anything else, guys? Otherwise, we should have a Vibrance episode on Wednesday. And that is where we tackle habits, health, attitudes, and all those sorts of non-art skill things that help us get ahead in our art, in our pursuits, and in our life in general. Yep. Ricardo says, some advice on how to draw without pet the lines. I'm not sure what that means. How to draw without pet the lines. Dennis says, what was the challenge again? The challenge was to do the creature. So we have a aquatic creature that is underwater. My computer just decided to freeze up for a moment. Okay. Aquatic creature. He has some sort of horns or antlers, whatever that makes sense, underwater. He has at least 2 appendages, and he has exoskeleton plating. So maybe this is a really funny-looking crab creature, or maybe this is a monstrous sort of, devouring leviathan. That is entirely up to you. So that's what we're doing. Or you don't necessarily have to show it underwater. Maybe somebody caught it and they, stuffed it and put it on their wall. That's fine too. Just give me the creature. Now remember, you don't have to do an environment with it. You can do just kind of a character scene that has just the character, right? And you just show some sketches that goes along with it. Sort of what the other fellow did with the train, right? And here's some sketches I did with it. And he didn't do a lot with the background. It's just some plains and some mountains and some sky. And it's not about the lighting. Just show me a really cool looking creature. Find some neat shapes. This is definitely one where you should pull up some references of other creatures. So get a handful of things like beetles, maybe that have exoskeletons. And then look for underwater creatures. Like if you crossed a rhino beetle with a jellyfish, what would you get? Maybe something like this. Like a jellyfish that has horns and it has plates on its tentacles. Or if you cross that with a chicken, I think, underwater chicken that has bone plating. What would that look like? So get 2 or 3 other animals, and that would be a good starting point, and you piece some of those elements together. Okay, let's see. I've got comments going on. I gotta pull this back up. Yeah, it does not like it when I mess with the screen that has the chat. All right, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'll just let it sit there. George says, what I was able to sketch while watching the screen image. Okay, sorry, I'm not going to try to open something while this is having problems loading. But you can drop it over in the Facebook chat, and I'll take a look at it. Ricardo says, drawing, making one solid curve on the paper instead of making many little tiny lines. I think it's a matter of confidence. If you're making a lot of little ones, yeah, it is confidence, but it also is a real indicator that you're probably holding on the end of the pencil way too close. That is something I see students do a lot when I'm teaching class, is that they hold down here, then what happens? You have no fulcrum. right? You have no fulcrum. You can't make a curve out of that. It's too little. So if you back up, all of a sudden, oh, now look, you have a lot more fulcrum to work from. And if you're making big curves, then you need to change your hand position. This position being right up on the end of the pencil and having it in this position in your hand is fine if you're writing, but that's not always how you want to hold it if you're drawing. So sometimes when you're drawing, actually most of the time when you're drawing, you need to be backed up a lot. So back it up to here, and then you're going to get a lot better curves out of it. Another thing is, if you're making bigger curves, you need to hold the pencil like this. So you can do this way. You're not using the joints in your fingers, you're working from your elbow. Now all of a sudden you can do that. Much better. Also, I'm a fan of this one, holding the pencil between those fingers, like this, because it forces you to back up. It sets the entire length of your finger, and drawing it this way. Still a lot of control, kind of the same amount of control that you get from this, but it forces you to back up and you don't choke down on the pencil as easy. So some of those little changes can help you back up. You get curves better. Also, learn to sketch very lightly. Lightly do a curve. Even if it's a bad curve, if you lightly put one in, and then you can use that as a guide for correction to do a better curve. So you go over it several times. A lot of people, they want to do one line and it be perfect. Well, sure, if you can, great. But if not, if you're like the rest of us, then you do, even a bad line is fine because you can immediately see where the bad line is bad and you can do another line or two to correct it. Next up, I am designing a Google logo for the Doodle for Google contest. Any tips? Simple. Make it simple. All right. I've made a lot of logos when I was doing graphic design, and I would say a company like that, probably a ligature. That is, they don't need, some sort of character logo. So you're probably going to be getting something like the letter G and doing a twist on it. Turn the G into a cloud, or turn the G into something else, or add a funny little curve to the G. And a good logo should also be one that works in black and white. So don't rely on having a full spectrum of colors and having high definition in order to sell a logo so that you understand and it looks good. A lot of the best logos in the world work fine, very small, and in black and white. So aim for that as well. Asio says, I struggle with drawing anything without directly copying reference. How should I approach drawing with reference, not entirely copying an image? Don't use a perfect reference. That can be a good way to do it. So it's like this. Say you want to draw a knight, and the knight is standing here heroically with his sword. And you have a reference of some armor that you really like. Great. Then don't draw the armor from that photo. Use the pose from one and the armor from another one. So you have to understand how that armor works and move it in the three-dimensional space of the image over to this other one. So don't copy the pose and the subject from the same image. Use one or the other and combine it with something else. And then all of a sudden your artistic license and intuition has to kick in because you have to equate one thing to the other thing. Also, if you're doing it maybe by lighting, then change it up on that case. Maybe the pose and, the armor in this case is what you like. Fine. But then use the lighting from a different situation. And that way you can't copy it because the lighting from that scene has a different color scheme and position than the scene that you're drawing, but the pose is the same. And it'll force you to at least think through it. And you'll put your own little artistic flair on it. And that should help you from copying it too much. And that's one of those cases that imperfect reference or multi-references being split over multiple images can actually be better because Yeah, you do see that. It can be easy to get in the copyist mentality. I think every artist has at some point. You just start saying, well, that's the answer. But like I say in my reference video out on the channel, if you haven't watched it, go check that one out. That, approach a reference image the same way that a cook or chef might approach a recipe. That is, it's a guideline. If you want that exact thing, then fine, do that. But that's a known end. So where do you want to take it? What are you going to add to it? Another thing would be basically any combination of two. All right, so use that and add something else. Change the light. Add this light to this one. Add this pose to this one. Add whatever to this one. Cross this armor design with this armor design. And then that will help, it fit together a little better. That looks like about everything here. We're already an hour and a half in. I've got to get to the gym pretty soon, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate everybody joining the stream this time. And let's see, do we need 2 weeks for this one? You know what? Let's go ahead and do that. Let's try it out. So we'll do 2 weeks for the creature design. Feel free to send in the sketches. I will do some review sketches and give some ideas and give some feedback about how things are going for next week. Then you will have the following week to send in the final. So you get 2 weeks on this one. And feel free to send in your works in progress. Otherwise, there was something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, we will be picking up and doing more Patreon releases next month. So if you like what I talk about, if you like the things that I say, you want to see some of the artwork that I make and how I make it, or if you want to get feedback from me personally on some of your projects, go check out the Patreon. It is what basically funds me being able to do this. So that is at patreon.com/swatches. Link is in the description. And I will be going over my astronaut image and some more of my Oberon images that for my project on the next release there. So thank you everybody for joining, and until I see you next time, keep drawing.